Okay, everyone. So this is the video that'll show you how to create your tiny house in Homestyler. So to start this week, you were supposed to have watched this video about Brett Sutherland, who created a very spacious and open tiny home on wheels. The difference between his and the one you watched week one was this was much bigger, and you might have noticed it seemed much more spacious. But the downside of being so spacious is that it's obviously a much larger house, and therefore it would be harder to drive around if you actually were to drive this much. But I think the intent of both of these houses was to stay in one location for a decently long time. So those are just all considerations. It's also obviously more expensive to build a bigger home and whatnot. So anyway, let's get started. Last week you were supposed to have turned in a hand sketch, roughly to scale, of your tiny house design. So this is mine. It's assuming that it is the maximum footprint. So it's the outside of this tiny house would be around 8.5 feet wide by 40 feet long. I included a porch just so that you don't have to stand outside when you're unlocking. Some whatever, you can maybe put a little chair out here if you want to sit outside and so on. My idea was a couch, some stairs go up to the loft. This line indicates the loft, and then the loft would be above this space. I figured I wanted a kitchen under the loft just so that when you're sitting in the living room and hanging out where you spend most of the time, you will not feel quite so cramped by having that loft above you. Um, the ceiling would be more open. Bathrooms in the back. I don't necessarily love this idea because it takes away location for light to come in, but I did like that otherwise everything in here is very much open, sort of like Brett's design, and unlike Austin's design, the first one. My thought was that this would be one long kitchen countertop of some kind that you could sit at. Also, it would be like a desk and table. You can sit with stools going across the way. And then this is your countertop with all of your appliances. So a stove, a sink. I would probably locate the sink down this way just so that it's closer to the bathroom. And it's good to share plumbing space that way. Um, and then the oven and the refrigerator would go over here. If I don't love the way that ends up looking, maybe I'll cut into the space here and put the fridge over here somewhere. And then I figured rather than a straight up ladder like Austin's, I liked Brett's idea where he had a very narrow and steep stairway going up to the loft. This would be maybe some more storage and a TV space, closet, maybe a folding table over here that you could put a computer on. Those are to be determined. But anyway, let's get started in Homestyler. So you should have your design up in front of you so that you can work. Now you're going to want to obviously come here and say, oh, sorry, we're not going to the existing designs. We're going to create a new one. So I'm going to go back to the home page and say start designing. And create new design. Now, I want to bring you back to last week's requirements. This is showing that right here, the footprint size. So according to the highway rules in the United States, the trailer should be no longer than 40 feet and no wider than almost 8.5 inches. But because we have to allow for wall thickness and so on, we're going to give the interior dimensions this. And Homestyler likes to work with interior dimensions. So it's going to be 38.9 by 7.2. So let's go back to Homestyler. I'm just going to close that one. And now you can just say draw a room. So you can start typing right away. Okay, and I meant to work on the height of the walls, but we'll do that later. Now for my walls or my design, I had a bathroom here. Now, the interior walls do not need to be as thick as the exterior walls. The exterior walls, I said, were going to be 6.5 inches. So I made them a little bit thin, but this program doesn't allow you to do half inches here anyway, or half-inch increments. I'm going to say this bathroom wall is only going to be 2 inches wide. And I know that's very narrow, but I figure that's a 2x4 standing along its skinnier axis, plus some wallboard of some kind. And we'll work on this exact spacing later. I'm going to create my. Oh, I got to change this again. Actually, since this is an exterior wall, I'm going to leave that at 6 inches. And I had a little alcove here with some storage here. So I'm going to create this or name this space a porch. Somewhere in here is a, there it is. Name this the bathroom. And this space, we can just call it, we'll just call the whole thing living or living and dining, however you want to name it, because we're not going to be sectioning off the actual kitchen in any way. Okay, so now what do we do to create an actual loft? You can't create floors in this program, so what you do is you just instead create a ceiling and make it look like it's also a floor. So I'm going to start by making all of my exterior walls. So I'm going to select all of them by hitting the control button while I click. And I'm going to make their heights a little bit higher. So they're already pretty tall at 9.2. So let's leave that there. But I don't want my interior walls to be as tall because the way I'm planning my roof is to just have one long, tall gable roof, just like Austin's house did. So if you want to change the height, you have to say partial. And what that means is that the walls are partially at partial height. And the default's 4.3. I'm going to make them say 7.5 feet. So that means that, I guess these will perhaps be different because those are going to be an exterior wall, but we'll deal with that later. So now to create a ceiling, you go to the building, and it's actually under roofs. There's technically no roof. I'm just going to pick this one, even though it has this funky decorative ceiling shape. You wouldn't want that in a tiny home, but that's all they have. So let's just place this in. I'm going to put it in this back corner because that's where I want my loft to be. And I'll snap it down so this is that. So it's the same width as the inside of the house, and I'll come up so it's roughly halfway. Now, obviously, you don't need your loft to be this long, so you'd have to decide if you want a bed here with some storage space or what you'd want to do with this extra space, or maybe you don't want to use that extra space. Or maybe you don't want a 40-foot long trailer. 40 feet is really long to drive around. So this ceiling is at 8 feet. I want it to be at 7 feet 6, just like those wall heights that I just made. Don't need it to be a foot and 2 inches thick. So let's say it's 7 inches thick. So that's roughly a 2x6 to support it, plus a little floorboard and so on. And let's look at our 3D view. Actually, I want to, and there's that funky ceiling I was talking about. All right, so this shows your house roughly. There's not much going on here yet. Oh, I meant to trim away these walls here too, because I said this was going to be a little porch. Okay, going back to the floor plan. So the next roof section we're going to add is the sloped ceiling, which will simulate the entire roof. So again, come over here to the building, go down to roofs, and now we're going to want to pick one of the sloped ceilings. Go with this one. And now I'm just going to click it in there for now. And I know that the width can be no more than 40 feet. Length has to be no more than 8 foot 5 inches. If you notice these, if you try to move it, I'm going to show you what happens. It snaps so that one inside corner of the roof meets the inside of the walls. And that's because this is modeled as a ceiling, not necessarily a roof. So it thinks that you want the ceiling to only be on the inside. We're trying to simulate this as a wall, or sorry, as a roof. So I'm going to nudge this so that it's roughly in the middle. And you can see there's barely no overhang on the roof. Overhang is where the roof sticks out more than the walls. So you should probably make your walls even skinnier than what we have here, or smaller outside dimensions. But let's just go with this for now. So that's the overall footprint of the roof, or the shape. The lift right here is the height where the roof would start. So where we put the last ceiling, which was where the loft started, was at 7.6. So we wouldn't want our roof to be any lower than that. I actually would want it to be a little bit higher so we have a little bit more vertical wall. Like it's called a knee wall, where you have a little bit of wall sticking up before the roof then starts to slope. So I'm going to put it at 8 feet for now. And now this lift. Actually, let me put this into a 3D view so you can see how this is being affected. And don't worry about the fact that our walls are sticking out more than the roof. We can fix that later. This height is the height of the roof from basically the bottom, which is where the lift starts, to the peak. So our maximum is 13.5, I believe, if I remember correctly. Let me confirm that. Yep, so the maximum is 13, actually 13.4 according to this picture, minus the 1.7 actually. So if you go to, that's where this requirement came from, which says that, oh, here it is. Sorry about that. The tallest point on your trailer has to be less than 11.9. So going back to this, that means 11.9 minus 8 feet. The maximum we could have is a 3'9" height. I don't want it to be quite that high though, because it's not fun trying to fit a trailer under a very tall bridge. It limits the roads you can go on. So rather than saying 3'9", I'm just going to say 3 feet for now. These are decisions that you as a designer can make. And there you go. Now that's our roof with our walls. And you can see the height is pretty tall for those starting walls, but that's okay because I'd rather maximize the wall space so that we have more space for windows, and it just gives you a more airy feeling on the inside. Now, if you don't want these walls to be quite so tall, let's go back here. I'm going to hide the ceiling. So again, you hit this hide button, right click and say hide. If you want to bring it back, you can say right click and show all, and it brings it back again. So I'm going to hide it. And now I'm going to select all of these walls by hitting the control button. Oops. And now change their height. Actually, they're set to a full height, so what we can do is come under wall settings and change what the full height actually is. And let's set that to be 8 feet, because that's where we had our walls start, or sorry, our roof start. And now if we go back out to the 3D view, hopefully they look shorter. I'm going to right click and say show all out here. And there you go. Now our walls aren't sticking through. Don't really think there's a good way to have this wall extend up in Homestyler, because this isn't really made for viewing the exterior so much. So let's just go with that for now. And yeah, that's what it's going to look like. This is more about designing the inside of your tiny house. Okay, now I'm going to check on the inside view. And to do that, I want to change to 3D. And here's what the inside looks like. You can see here's our lower ceiling here, the upper ceiling there. It is not looking sloped to me, but maybe that's just because it's so crammed in, or maybe Homestyler doesn't give us that view right now. We'll deal with that when we're modifying the inside more. This is what I want you to get started with. The next thing you'd want to do is add some doors and windows to where you want them. So let's hide this. Before I hide this, actually, you can notice here the width of this is given, and this is wider than it's allowed, so 40 feet. 8.5 is the max in that direction, and now I feel a little better about how big it is. But again, it's snapping. Oh, here. If you use your arrow keys, you can use your arrow keys to nudge it along, which is a much easier way to go because every time I click on it to move it, it's snapping. So I'm going to hide both ceilings. All right. So now you can start adding doors and windows just like you did with your other designs. You may want to bring this wall in so that you're not so close to the maximum limits. And you know how to add doors and windows at this point. You go to building, doors, windows. You want to minimize the type of swing door, the swing type of door, because they take up a lot of room. You could always use a sliding door, or folding doors are great. A pocket door of some kind. You could even use a curtain like you saw in which one? In Brett's video. There's also, if you go to components, oh sorry, under catalog, and you go to somewhere in here is curtain. You should be able to just type curtain under the search. And there you go. So if you want a curtain for your bathroom door or to separate any areas, you could do that. This is a roll-up curtain. So if you don't want to slide over, you want to slide up and down. So all these different kinds of options. I'm going to leave this up to you to fill this in for now. And that details the structure of your trailer house, or sorry, tiny house on wheels. You definitely want to save it at this point. You call it tiny house on a trailer if you want, and your name. Oh, and I meant to delete these walls. Actually, I don't want to delete these because then it doesn't allow me to have this little space here. If you want, you can, I actually change these to be 6-inch walls, so then when you're looking from the outside, you don't really see them, but it still allows the program to create that little room out there. A little bit of a cheating way to do it. All right, that does it for this portion. Check back to see details on how to add all the components to your tiny house.